الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المجاهدين وإمام المتقين وقائد الغر المحجلين وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم في سبيل شريعته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. After the last presentation, anything is a damn close. I don't have a chance. But let me try my best. We are a community that not only sings, but we read. And so let us pay some attention to this idea of Iqra and see how important that is for our lives as well. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Until the 19th century, there were two quite distinct strands of biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, written by different types of authors and geared to very different audiences. Muslims wrote by and large pious hagiography for Muslim readers, and Western authors wrote in Latin or the various European vernaculars for non-Muslim readers. A long tradition starting in the Middle Ages presented Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a false prophet, a heresiarch, an impostor, the author of a false religion. While a few of these European authors read Arabic sources about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they did so with an eye to understanding and denouncing the false religion that he had founded. This began to change in the 18th century when some Enlightenment writers portrayed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a positive light, such as the case of Henry Comte de Bolonviers, who in order to better criticize the Catholic Church, makes the Muslim prophet into an anti-clerical hero who freed believers from a corrupt church and reinstated the direct link between God and His faithful. In the following century, romantic writers such as Washington Irving and Thomas Carlyle made Muhammad into a hero, legislator to his people, and a great man. We are interested principally in what happens next. In other words, starting in the 19th century and increasingly until today, Muslims and non-Muslims read and react to each other's depictions of Islam and of the Prophet ﷺ. This is due in part to the increased knowledge of Arabic and other Eastern languages by European scholars, but is principally the result of the emergence of French and English as an international language read by millions of Muslims, be they subjects of the British and French colonial empires, immigrants to Europe, Australia, and the Americas, or simply authors expressing themselves in the emerging global common language of English. As a result, these various strands have become thoroughly entangled. The process began in the 19th century when Muslims in the British and French empires started to read what European authors had written about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they reacted. Two of the lives of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam most widely read in English were Humphrey Prideaux's polemic true nature of the impostor fully displayed in the life of Muhammad, and also the less vicious but nevertheless negative portrayal by William Muir, the Protestant missionary and British colonial official, the life of Muhammad from original sources. If time permitted, we could have looked at some of these works and the two refutations that they sparked from Ahmad Khan, writing in Urdu and English, and Sayyid Amir Ali in English. Both authors were closely involved in the British administration in India, and both sought to refute what they saw as Western Christian prejudice and misunderstanding of Islam. Khan and Sayyid Amir Ali assailed both the lack of objectivity in Prideaux and Muir and their failure to understand the Arabic sources. At the same time, Khan, Sayyid Amir Ali, and other Muslim authors writing in English or in French refuted the standard Western accusations against Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam: his violence, his supposed lust manifested in his polygamy, his supposed opportunistic feigning of some or all of his revelations. These authors then had to address the concerns of their European readers and had to justify or at least contextualize those elements of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's biography that could seem strange or offensive to them. Even in biographies written by Muslims for other Muslims, this apologetical strain is increasingly found, as in a globalized world increasingly dominated by European Christians, some Muslim authors feel a need to justify and explain elements of the Prophet's life to their Muslim readers. Other European authors were called in to testify to Muhammad's greatness, Carlyle and Irving, for example. Some Muslim authors placed the accent less on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's religious calling than on his low role as a legislator, statesman, and reformer. In the 1930s, a slew of Egyptian intellectuals from both pious and secular points of view wrote glowing biographies of the Prophet ﷺ, usually portraying him as a far-thinking political leader, a lawgiver, and a moral model. In the mid-20th century, Fakir Sayyid Wahiduddin wrote a biography of Muhammad ﷺ, in which he affirmed that the Prophet ﷺ was even better than Napoleon, since he combined military and political prowess with religious merit. His book, translated into English as The Benefactor, became standard reading for members of the Nation of Islam in the US. For the purpose of this presentation, we will make some general comments and then list some works on the subject and share a few reflections on these. I would like to begin this presentation by making readers aware of some of the issues at stake when reading the Seerah. Recently, the writing of Seerah and the representation of Rasul ﷺ has been the subject of several interesting studies. To mention one recent work, we can quote the work of Ahmad Ghuni, who in his book Prophet Muhammad in the French and English Literature, 1650 to the present, presents a pioneering study of French and European literary and theological representations of Islam in the modern period, and offers a survey of over 350 years in which both a cross-cultural history and a discussion of the intellectual changes in the representation of the Prophet's life based on the examination of original published and unpublished manuscripts. Reading of the Seerah. Essentially, this is what is at stake in the bibliographical study of the Seerah literature. We will limit our study and examination to works in the English language. We also further limit the scope of our investigation by looking at works that are printed, albeit taking cognizance of the way in which we read is fast changing. Websites and blogs, as well as ebooks, are a growing source from which people read. The other medium is audiobooks, which are also impressive in the breadth of choices that they offer. Reading the Seerah is essentially what the author of any Seerah does. In that sense, the author's approach and ideology determines what he is going to draw and glean from the Seerah. Seerah writing is not a passive and a thoughtless practice. Instead, it is a very deliberate attempt at using the noble biography for didactic purposes. The Seerah allows us to draw conclusions and to apply lessons to our own context and circumstances. It allows the author to couch his own interpretation of the religion in the biography of the Prophet of Islam. There are multiple readings of the Seerah, just as there are multiple readings of the religion itself. All of them are far from equal. Many are contradictory, and many more are competing interpretations. I think this is a very, very important thing, that Seerah writing is not free from ideological bias. People write Seerah because they're trying to drive at a certain point, and I will show you examples of this just now. So essentially what we are doing is we are reading a reading. This makes the task not only the more interesting and reflective, but it's also a challenge for the critical thinker like you, that when you pick up a book of Seerah, you must know that you are reading somebody else's reading of the Seerah. Okay, this is an important point. The best work of the Seerah, if somebody were to ask you what in your opinion is the best work of the Seerah, there can be no doubt that as Muslims, we can only reply by saying that it has to be the Quran. Undoubtedly, the Quran serves as the best Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, and just as it is paradigmatic to speak of the Prophet's life as the Quran, it is equally true to say that the Quran is the best Seerah of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. This also puts paid to the idea that a good Seerah is a chronological account of the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Reading the Quran as a book of Seerah brings the Quran alive. It provides context and is a clarion call to recognize the place of revelation in the living and the dynamic Muslim community then, and by extension to our own time as well. The Seerah is literature, literary theory, reception theory, and hermeneutics. As with any other literature, there are essentially three considerations at play here: the author, the text, and the reader. The author has an audience in mind and uses the text to convey meaning. An examination of the text allows us to derive information about the reader and the intended audience. At times there are external information that fill the gap, but we often have to look at the text itself. Where the horizon of the text meets the horizon of the audience, meaning is achieved. Our problem is one of interpretation. Moments in Seerah literature. There are certain events in recent past which have resulted in an increased spurt in the number of works written in the Seerah genre. In this regard, state patronage also plays a role. The prize for Seerah writing in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia is one such impetus which has played a role. Sympathetic leaders such as the late General Ziaul Haq, who promoted these prizes, were a source of inspiration to many writers. Salman Rushdie's satanic verses and the controversy that followed prompted Muslim writers to produce works in the Seerah genre. In recent times, 9/11 and the Charlie Hebdo affair had a similar effect. The number of works that have been produced in Turkey in recent days is also quite laudable. Limiting the genre. There are a number of types or subgenres of the Seerah literature. In a recent extensive bibliographical survey of the works in the Arabic language, Husnul Masira fi Mu'allafat al-Seerah, Sheikh Abdul Aziz Dakhli identifies a number of categories in the Seerah genre. And we can see that there are books that are devoted completely to the battles. There are other books that are devoted to the characteristics of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are books that are devoted only to the Isra and the Miraj. So he lists about 23 different categories. For the purpose of our presentation, we will limit our review to the following books available in the English language, books that are popularly available, and books that mainly attempt to provide a chronological record of the Seerah. However, some examples are from other types of Seerah writing. South African publications on the Seerah. This researcher has not sufficiently explored the scope of South African publications on the Seerah. There are only a couple of titles listed here. Our preliminary observations show that the main Seerah writing in South Africa has been mainly directed at student readership. The most widely used book in this regard is Mawlana Muhammad Ali bin Zubair Ali's Seerah, Sayyidul Anbiya sallallahu alaihi wasallam, life story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This work, now published as a book for the general public, was prescribed extensively in maktab settings. The book that you have in your hands is also translated in South Africa by Madrasah Islamiyyah. It has also been abridged in South Africa by the Ta'limi Board of the KwaZulu-Natal. If I may just say something, the Ta'limi Board of the Jamiah KwaZulu-Natal have exceptionally good publications. If you want to start a library, go to their website and order your books online from them. Now they are online at the moment, and you can order books, and they keep a very good stock of books. The list of suggested books of the Seerah. So what follows is a discussion of some of the popular works of the Seerah. Let us go through. There's a list that I have here of 40 books, so inshallah we should be making tahajjud here. But I will skip over. I can just go through this list. There's an updated list. You're welcome to have the updated list. I've got a discussion. If I can go down to the discussion. These are some of the titles that we have identified. There are 40 such titles, and these books are available in the market in South Africa. The book that you have in front of you, let's start with a discussion on that book. This is the Siratul Mustafa by Muhammad Idris Saab Khandlawi, translated by Mufti Muhammad Qadwa, published by Madrasah Islamiyyah, and then abridged by the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu-Natal. This is a abridged version that you have of a 3-volume masterpiece in Urdu. If you had paid more for your registration, we could have given you the 3-volume book. This is essentially written in response to a book by Mawlana Shibli Nomani and completed by Sayyid Sulaiman Nadwi called Seerat al-Nabi. And it clarifies important issues and counters some recent misconceptions that have arisen around the Prophet ﷺ's noble life. The book is thorough, and arguably it is the best available book on the subject in the English language. The author is Mawlana Muhammad Idris Khandlawi. He was one of the authors of the constitution, the Pakistani constitution. And he has a Ma'arif al-Quran, a tafsir of the Quran al-Kareem, and really his mind, you can see a very clear genius of the man in his work, and at all times he's very, very careful about the riwayat, the narrations that he brings, and also the lessons that he takes out. Another very important book is that of the intellectual giant Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi. The book is called The Prophet of Mercy. In Arabic, it's Seerah al-Nabawiyyah, and it is a very scholarly book, thoroughly researched book. The author is always mindful of the current generation's mindset, their taste, and the author has looked at extensively the literature available before making any claims in his book. And this book has been included in the syllabus of many universities. Sheikh Abul Hassan Ali Nadwi needs no introduction. He was this giant in terms of Islamic scholarship and is responsible for lots of the movement that we saw in the Islamic world in the 70s. A book that I like to pay particular attention to is one that I use extensively, The Jurisprudence of the Prophetic Biography by Dr. Muhammad Saeed Ramadan al-Bouti. This is called Fiqh al-Seerah in Arabic. And this is a one-volume book that concentrates on the lessons that can be learned from the life of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially lessons of a political and a legal nature. The unique feature of this book is the author uses these to rebut some of the Orientalist and modernist objections to the prophetic biography. The work has fewer details than other books, but does not mean that it doesn't have any details at all, because he provides sufficient details to take lessons from. I'd like to give you an example from the book. He discusses the Hudaybiyah. And then after Hudaybiyah, he says, what are the lessons and principles that we can take from the first messages that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent to the various kings and rulers, the letters, etc. And he says, the detachments which the Messenger of Allah dispatched to the tribes scattered throughout the region, as well as the letters which he sent to the various kings and potentates, are features which set this phase of the life mission apart from the phase which preceded it. So he makes a point here that this phase now, the phase after Hudaybiyah, was a phase where, because there was no engagement with the Quraysh because of the truce, Islam was able to establish itself, many people came into the deen, and also the model of governance and the model of the state that was set into place there is a model for mankind till the end of time. And he says, at this point now, if anybody rejected the message, then Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam followed it up with an army to defend the Muslim position. And the idea that Islam is spread by force, he puts into context. You know, we always say Islam is not spread by the sword. But the truth of the matter is that he says Islam is spread by dominion. People take over lands, and those people then become Muslims because of that. The subjects become Muslims. This is the reason why, after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people who became Muslims because of convenience to save themselves turned murtad at the time. Because this was the way Islam spread. And he makes this point very, very clearly, and he puts, I think, to rest lots of the objections against Islam in a very, very good way. People should read the Seerah very carefully, because he's very clear on the political stance of Islam on many issues. Another person that comes out of the movement, so to the Islamic movement, is Dr. Mustafa As-Sibai. The life of the Prophet Muhammad, highlights and lessons. He himself is an Ikhwani. He passed away recently, but he was always a person who was from the movement, Islamic movement, and you see, he takes out highlights and lessons from the Seerah for du'at, for people who are in the field, who are doing da'wah. The next work, Ar-Rahiq al-Makhtoom, is one of the more recognized and widely distributed short works of the Seerah. You ask anybody what is the best work of the Seerah, and they all say it is Safiur Rahman al-Mubarak Puri's Ar-Rahiq al-Makhtoom. It's a prize award-winning book, and many students prefer the quotations, the primary sources that he refers to. I'd like to bring your attention to something. The methodology of the Seerah writers and the methodology of the Hadith writers differ. Seerah writers were concerned about constructing the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. So they were not strict in the sense that they didn't put the same exacting type of requirements on the narration before accepting it, because they wanted to have a complete picture. Hadith scholars had to sift out and make sure that in Bukhari and Muslim only very, very sahih riwayat abroad. And so when we're writing Seerah, we have to write using the methodology of the Seerah writers. And when we're writing hadith, then we write using the methodology of the hadith. If you impose a hadith methodology, as Mubarak Puri has done, onto Seerah writing, you're left with a very dry account of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life. Because now you've excluded a number of important facts that give you the full picture. So in this sense, in our view, this book is a book of hadith. It is not a book of Seerah. And I think that our praises for this book in some cases needs to be mitigated. The next book that I'd like to draw your attention to is The Noble Life of Muhammad the Prophet by Dr. Ali Muhammad Al-Shalabi. Dr. Shalabi has written a series of books now on the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, and he's a very proficient writer. His 3-volume book, the Seerah, I've been using for a dars every Friday mornings on Seerah, and I find it to work very well. He gives you full references for whatever he has to, and he spends time at the end of every chapter drawing out the important lessons. However, there are some lessons that Seerah writers miss. For example, two weeks ago, we discussed the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was breastfed by Ayman radiallahu ta'ala. And Shalabi mentions that Ayman was an Abyssinian slave, a black Abyssinian slave. For us, in the South African context, that fact is absolutely important. If you want to give dawah to somebody, and you tell them, you know, the perfect man in my life, and the greatest man that ever lived in my life, was first breastfed by a black lady. That gives your dawah so much more impetus and so much more weight. The fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's home, Ayman was married to Zayd ibn Haritha. They had a child with Usama ibn Zayd. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's home was a multicultural home. For us in the South African context, there are lessons that we can take out that these authors in other contexts miss. So I think that there is a reading of the Seerah in each and every one of you, that you can read the Seerah for your own lessons that you take for your own life. In any case, the book that is widely acclaimed is Muhammad, He's Blessed His Life, based on the earliest sources by Martin Links. This is an internationally acclaimed, comprehensive and authoritative account of the life of the Prophet. People love this book because of the engaging style that the author uses in the way he presents his Seerah. And this is a widely used book. Martin Links' book is famous in the Seerah. However, I'd like to draw your attention to something. Martin Links is a perennialist. And by perennialist, we mean people who believe that Allah, or God, manifests himself in many ways through many religions over time. And so they believe in the veracity and the truth of all religions. And this is why you will find in the beginning of his Seerah, he gives so much attention to the Hanifs. The Hanifs, remember, were that group of people in Makkah al-Mukarramah who followed the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and had the vestiges of that religion. They would circumcise, they would do ghusl janabat, they would do other acts of fitrah, and they make sajda, etc. And so he gives a lot of attention to that period. You see in the beginning of the book, because they understand that there is this one perennial religion that flows from the beginning of time and that continues with mankind. So we have to understand that the ideology of the author always comes out at some point or the other in Seerah writing, and we have to refer to the ulama and make sure that we know what books we are reading. Sayyid Sulaiman Nadwi, the famous author, he has written 2 books, Muhammad the Ideal Prophet and Muhammad the Prophet of Peace. Both the books have been translated. The Ideal Prophet, you can see the contents there. This is a brilliant book. The author has a very, very keen eye for the Seerah, and he has made the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam into a separate subject. This is the forte of this book. The other book I'd like you to draw your attention to is the Atlas on the Prophet's biography, Places, Nations and Landmarks. You've probably all seen this book. widely available now, Dr. Shawki Abdul Khalil. But there is another atlas that is perhaps better, and this is the atlas of the biography of the Prophet ﷺ by Sami bin Abdullah al-Maghloud, published by Ubay Khan. And his set of atlases that are available as PDFs also online are excellent. They're far superior than this common Darus Salam publication that we know. There are other publications such as the Cambridge Companion to Muhammad, edited by Jonathan Brown Brockhoff. These are works of academics. They are interested in presenting Islam from an academic perspective, and so they are university academics. From a non-confessional point of view, they get together and they write about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. You must understand these books for what they are. They are not meant for the believer, and sometimes we find it very difficult to read these books and what they say about the Nabi ﷺ. Muhammad Rasulullah, a concise survey of the life and the works of the founder of Islam by Muhammad Hamidullah. Muhammad Hamidullah wrote first in French. He wrote this book in French. And Muhammad Hamidullah is this very careful muhaddith, faqih, seerah scholar, and he had the opportunity to work with old manuscripts, and he writes this book for the French-speaking public, and it's been translated into English. Muhammad, the Encyclopedia of Seerah. Some of you have seen this book, published from 1985 to 1992 in 8 volumes. This is really a worthwhile buy. The publishers, the Seerah Foundation in UK, have produced this book, and they've also then got a companion set for children. And this is the thing, we need to ask ourselves, what works do we have in the Seerah for children? And I'm sure our mothers out there must be asking this question, are there any good books in the Seerah for children? Yes, there are a number of books that are very good for children now at the moment, and there are also attempts by people such as Hamza Yusuf and others to prepare literature for children. Muhammad, the Best of Creation, is a book that is written by Sayyid Muhammad ibn Alawi al-Maliki al-Hassani. Here, the author does not go chronologically through the life of the Prophet ﷺ, but rather looks at aspects of the Prophet ﷺ. His other book is Muhammad, the Perfect Man, a translation of Al-Insan al-Kamil. Again, the author tries to look at the life of the Rasul ﷺ, the prophetic biography, from the view of the various qualities of the Rasul ﷺ. And I've left that for the document. You can read that in the document. Sayyid Amir Ali's book is dated. We know that the life and the teachings of Muhammad, I said in the introduction, came as a response to some of what was happening at the time when people, Orientalists and others, were writing against Islam. It achieved a lot of praise, Sayyid Amir Ali's book, but we should note that Sayyid Amir Ali is also the author of the history of the Saracens, and here he displays the fact that he is a Shia, and his Shia bias comes out very, very clearly in the history of the Saracens. He has been described as an Indian Islamic modernist, a Shiite philosopher, and a historian of religion. Miraj Muhyiddin has written this book, Revelation, the Story of Muhammad. This is a typical example of a book that has come after 9/11. And in these books, we see that people try to produce a modern approach to the seerah. And it's a modern type of apologetic for the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. So I think we have a number of these type of books that came out after 9/11 to show that the Prophet ﷺ only took in defense of jihad, and there was an explanation for his multiple wives, and all of this. So we should be aware of the fact that this is what goes behind these type of books. Ibn Ajiba's book is very important, Prophetic Grace, the Quranic merits of the Prophet Muhammad. This is a collection of Ibn Ajiba's tafsir, the Moroccan tafsir of Ibn Ajiba, where all the verses referring to the Quran, to the Rasul ﷺ are then explained. The unique qualities of the Prophet ﷺ and his community, the Khasais al-Nabi, is the subject of Imam Yusuf al-Nabhani's book, and it is also a worthwhile buy. There is this book, Muhammad, Islam's First Great General. This book is in the series of great generals of the world. And it is written by a non-Muslim who suggests that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not only a great leader, religious leader, but also a great soldier. And he looks at how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his life displayed his military genius. And so this book is a unique study. It comes from a non-Muslim person who has ranked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as one of the greatest generals to ever live. Fatullah Gulen's book, Muhammad the Messenger of God, is also important now, but also displays this type of apologetic, this type of moderate Islam, and one should be aware of these trends, especially now that his movement have been declared a terrorist organization. Muhammad, Man and Prophet by Adil Salahi. The Jamiah al-Ulama, when they were faced with the issue that they needed to give books on Islam to ministers and people in important positions in South Africa, chose this book of Adil Salahi as a gift for these ministers and people in positions in South Africa. The reason for that is that this book looks at the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his contact with other cultures, in his attempt to achieve mutual human understanding and world peace. So the strand in this book really comes through very, very well. If you want to read a classic, then you have to read Qadi Iyaz's Muhammad, Messenger of Allah. This Ashifa of Qadi Iyaz is as absolutely important reading for anybody who wants to read about the Seerah. And finally, a book that you can prescribe for students is Muhammad, the Final Messenger by Dr. Majid Ali Khan, also a book that won the award in Pakistan for being the best book in Seerah. I hope that at the end of this paper we are able to understand what is at stake when reading works on the Seerah. It also makes some brief comments, and you can please download the complete paper. We've tried to make some comments in that paper on the nature of these books. This is not a sanction for any one of these books. I'm not sanctioning any of these books. I'm not telling you that this is the best book to read, or this is not a book that you should read. The purpose of this presentation, I think, is to increase awareness of the books available, and also to encourage critical and reflective thinking on the books in the Seerah. If you have any suggestions, then please, you are welcome to contact me after this, inshallah. Jazakumullah. Are there any questions on this? I hope I haven't created more confusion. So as I said, if you ask me which is the best book of the Seerah, the Quran. Quran is the book of the Seerah. You have to read the Quran as a book of the Seerah. Because that is the book that explains the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How he established the community at Medina, how he struggles with the kuffar, all of that I explained in the Quran. Are there any questions? We'll take questions. Jazakallah for the opportunity. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi.